We are very fortunate to have Mr. Raghav Narsaley, Sir, Managing Director of Accenture Research with us. Sir has pursued his education in the field of statistics, economics and law and economics. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in statistics and economics respectively from University of Mumbai. He had completed his European Masters in Law and Economics from Erasmus University. He was awarded with the prestigious Erasmus Mundus Scholarship by the European Commission to pursue his coursework. He is an alumnus of Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata, from where he has completed his executive program in business analytics. He has avid interest in music and movies. He plays the Indian drums, the tabla. He is also an avid gardener. Presently, Sir is working as a managing director at Accenture Research and a global research led for its new business, Industry X.0. He is also the member of the jury for the prestigious innovation competitions such as Tata Innovista MTech India 2016, jointly organized by MIT Technology Review and the Mint. He was adjudged by the leading Indian daily, the Financial Express, in 2006 as one of the youngest influential policy thinkers in India. He was a part of the Insurance Regulatory Advisory Council and a member of the Skill and Employment Subcommittee of the Planning Commission for the 12th Five-Year Plan. His research in the field of innovation is published in prestigious Tier 1 publications such as Harvard Business Review, Stanford Social Innovation Review, and European Business Review, amongst others. In 2013, the Academy for Innovation and Entrepreneurship Conference at Oxford awarded a special mention for pioneering contribution to his work around inclusive business models. May I request Mr. Raghav Narsaley sir to guide all the participants for skills to succeed in the digital era. I warmly welcome you, sir.
Thank you, one and all. First of all, let me thank Dr. Vaidehi Daftardar, Principal Adarsh College for inviting me to be a part of this process. A big thank you to Forum of Free Enterprise, Dr. Swati Kapadia. I think this collaboration between Adarsh and Forum for Free Enterprise is extremely important. I think it's a very, very powerful, positive collaboration. Just reminded me, interestingly, if you look at the time right now, there are some presentations that actually start when they're supposed to end. It's one of these, and I'm just going to keep it pretty short, therefore. But still, try and cover points because I'm cognizant of the fact that a lot of you are, although being students, are busy, you pursuing things, you have your own priorities. So the topic of the day is, skills to succeed, as they call it in the digital era, right? And I'm going to go on the presentation mode. I'm just hoping it goes there. Yeah. So interestingly, what is the digital era, right? I mean, that is extremely important. What do you mean by the digital era? And the digital era is essentially a time period during which digital technologies, and you would have seen, the video that I shared with you of a company who is manufacturing air conditioners, wherein their CEO, wherein their chief of production, wherein the chief of the president of operations, they'd all talk about a range of digital technologies, right? From analytics, to digital twins, to technologies such as artificial intelligence, to technologies, such as social media. And I'm not, today going to talk a lot about those technologies because I think Google is quite sane enough to give you those definitions and the applications of the same. But what we are here to talk today is about, what are the skills required by you to succeed in this era of digital technologies. And so therefore, what do you mean by digital era? Essentially, digital era is, as I said, it's a time period when digital technologies are deeply influencing. And this is extremely important. Please understand the word of the meaning of the word, influencing. Because what is critical here, it is not about, they're just present, right? I mean, if something is just present around you, you really may consider or bother about it or may not, right? I mean, there are so many things that are present around us, but there are very few processes, very few things. There are very few kind of technologies that are actually influencing us. And I think the digital technologies are becoming more and more important for us because of the fact that they are deeply influencing. And what are they deeply influencing? They're deeply influencing what, where, and how we eat. Very simple things, right? I mean, the first time you want to actually visit, kind of a restaurant, etc., right? I mean, what is interesting is you are basically talking about technologies like Instagram. Success really means. And, kind of at a personal and a professional level, success in the digital era is being able to digitally influence, right? I mean, it's not now you should be able to digitally influence. What, where, and how must people eat all this? Must people be drinking? Must people be reading? So it's very interesting. And don't you do that? Actually, you do that every day, right? As soon as you consume a food from a restaurant, and if you've ordered it on a Zomato or some kind of an engine or an app, you immediately press your finger to give a rating to it. So what are you doing? You're digitally trying to influence the choices of other people, what they need to eat, drink. Similarly, on kind of the books, right? I mean, as soon as you read a book, and if there is some kind of, and if it's on a palm top, or if it is on a screen, a downloadable book, then you immediately kind of go, if you can go in Google Books or any other engine, and kind of give it immediately a rating. Similarly on travel, similarly on even the factories where you work, the choices that you have to make, to even what we can call access engines related to headhunting, or related to finding a job. A lot of those now can be digitally influenced, and your success in the digital era is at a personal and a professional level. The success is basically by the way in which, or to the extent to which, you are going to digitally influence what, where, and how. Floor 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they would have started talking about, how many cars can I produce with this given set of technology, right? But now it's not about how many number of cars I can produce, but it's about what is the experience I can give in that car to my end customer, so that that customer enjoys the ride. And that is a very significant change that you're now talking in the digital era. And your success in the digital era is therefore not basis the magnitude only of what you're doing, but the quality, the quality of that magnitude counts a lot. So it's not about, how much you're doing, but it is about how well you're doing that matters. And the digital era allows you to capture both, and it allows you to digitally influence, therefore, what, where, and how people have to drink, eat, etc., and their entire aspect of their daily life. Essentially going, to the word skill. And I'm taking these words, why? Because they are a part of my title, right? I mean, it's very important that before we actually engage in understanding skills, etc., we kind of decipher the meaning of these important words that make the title of my presentation today. So what do you mean by a skill? And I've referred to two dictionaries, which are broadly accepted dictionaries globally. So if you look at, the meaning of the word skill in Merriam-Webster dictionary, you are essentially talking about the ability to use one's knowledge effectively and readily in execution and in performance. So this is very important. It's about an ability, right? So a lot of us know many things, right? A lot of us know how to, for example, how to use YouTube. But the skill is to transform that YouTube into an engine of influencing people's way of eating, way of living, way of studying, etc. And that is a skill, because that requires not only knowing YouTube or the knowledge of YouTube, but it knows how to effectively and readily execute with that particular platform called YouTube to drive what we spoke earlier, which is influencing the choices made by people in their daily lives, right? So that is very, very important. The execution and the performance dimension is the key, difference between what we can call knowledge and skill. Because knowledge, many people have, right? I may be extraordinarily knowledgeable, but am I skilled? I don't know, because I don't know whether I'm able to execute on the knowledge I have. So theoretically, I may have learned how a rotor shaft works in a car, or something works, how an engine of a car functions, and that's what we do in an engineering college. But do we really know, I mean, how that particular part in an engine actually works? Do we really know how many components go in it, and if one component becomes faulty, how do you actually repair it? That's when the skill comes in, because then you know how really the engine is made, is maintained, is repaired, and how it works, right? Similarly, for commerce students, I mean, a lot of us know the accounting, but it's only when you are in a position to literally analyze and build a balance sheet is when people say, oh, you have a skill. Why? Because now your knowledge of accounting can be deployed effectively and readily to build a balance sheet which is a useful asset for a company, right? So I think understanding the difference between knowledge and skill is very important. And you might say, why is this guy going into basics? But let me tell you one thing, guys. I mean, first of all, I only know the basics. Honestly, I only thrive on that. But the most important part is, if you really don't know the basics, you can't really, create what we call the superstructure. So your base must be extraordinarily stable and sound. Your understanding of these basic terminologies of what is digital, what is the digital era, what do you mean by success, what do you mean by skill, is very important before we actually come to the next few set of slides. Okay, so now we come to this whole aspect of what do you mean by types of skills relevant to succeed in the digital era. And naturally, as I said, if you remember a few slides ago, I was really talking about success, meaning the ability to digitally influence what, where, and how must people be doing all these things on the right hand side. But naturally, if you want to digitally influence what people must wear or eat or drink, or where they work or enjoy, or how they travel, whatever is on that particular list of things, you can't just do it because you know how to travel or you know how to eat. I mean, a lot of us know how to eat does not mean we can influence anybody else's eating habits, right? I mean, in our families today, how many kind of mothers can confidently say that they actually influence the habits of eating of children, because it's difficult, right? In fact, you will see that the eating habits of children are more influenced, more than mothers, but by their peers, right? My friend eats this, or I actually saw someone eating this on Instagram, or I saw somebody eating this, the way of eating this on YouTube, and I found this very interesting, and therefore I'm eating it. Or especially around wearing, right, clothing, that's something that you constantly refer to a lot of these engines in order to really understand what to do, what combinations to wear. Is there something out of the world I can wear? Is there something I can go to? And if you want to be in that position to then become that person to influence, you need what I'm calling 4 broad categories of skills. So these are the 4 broad categories. Please do not misunderstand these to be exact skills. These are the 4 broad categories of skills, which we will discuss when we go on to the next slide, which is going to be the most interesting part of that presentation. So the first category of skills that is very important to digitally influence choices that people make are the soft skills. These are basically the abilities that enable us to interact effectively and harmoniously with others. I mean, imagine somebody coming on your screen and screaming and shouting at you to say, choose this. If you don't choose this, I'll hit you. You will never choose it. Simply done, right? I mean, you'll never choose it. As simple as that. So the way, why do you think people choose certain people, many a times, because they have an ability to smile. They have that ability to communicate with the movement of their face, which is a skill in acting. So it is a lot about that effective and harmonious. And harmonious is the most important word here, because you can communicate very effectively. It is very interesting when you actually scold a young child, or when somebody is scolding you, they're actually communicating effectively. But most of the times, the child becomes cranky when you scold it. Why? Because you're not communicating harmoniously, right? So it's about the effective and harmonious communication that matters a lot, especially when you are trying to digitally influence. Because remember, when you're trying to digitally influence somebody, you are on a screen. You are somewhere sitting, I don't know, you're sitting on the cloud, in short, right? You're sitting somewhere on the cloud. I cannot say thousands of kilometers or 15,000 kilometers away. We don't know, right? You're sitting on the cloud. And sitting on the cloud, you're basically influencing what I should be eating. And you better be good, because what you're telling me to eat. I'm not going to, kind of build my house or re-architect my house the way you're telling me. So your soft skills are very, very important. The next is, of course, the business skills. I mean, it's one thing to say I can digitally influence something, and it's a second thing to say I can make money out of it. Now, see, this is where it counts a lot, right? Because managing a business, making it, kind of what we can call financially viable is very important, right? Because even today, I can, kind of go on a screen and start, sharing videos after videos of what I have to say on skills. But at the end of the day, if that is how I'm going to build my career, and if I'm not going to get any financial viability in it, then I better choose something else, because either I'm lacking in something, right? So that could be a soft skill, it could be absolutely typical business skills, right? So these are essential skills, and we'll come to some of those, right? So business skills could be really, kind of a skill to, kind of, am I doing my day-to-day financial accounting well? Am I doing, am I managing my operations? Am I managing my people well? Those are kind of the skills that is what when we talk about business skills. But look at this. I have the soft skills, I have the business skills. But in today's world, as I said, if I don't have the value building skills, and this is very, very important. Remember, in the world of digital today, when there is so much of information that is coming to you, there is an information overload, as we got to say. We always, choose, right? That's why you keep on scrolling, right? If you are on any of the platforms like Instagram or Facebook or any of this, right? You keep on scrolling when you don't like things, right? And when you say that I don't like this, when you say that this is not useful for me, what is it all about? It is basically that particular video, that particular, particular advertisement, or that movie, or that subscription, or for that matter, anything that you're seeing is not building value for you. So there is one thing to say I have the best way to deliver, kind of my communication. I even can manage it very well with my people, with everything. But if you're not in the end going to build value for your customers, then it is going to be a disaster, right? It's just going to be a disaster. Why? Because you may not actually end up making money after some point of time. Why? Because the customers, they might want you to, they might see you once, they might see you twice, but if they believe the third time onwards, they are not really able to, digest what you're saying, even if you are the best guy in the town. If you have the best skills to manage your business, what they will say is, what this guy says does not have any value for me, right? So therefore, having that value building skill is very important. And lastly, is what I'm calling the human plus machine skills. Remember one thing, the first three skills were very important and continue and will continue to be very important across any era. But this particular skill, which is the human plus machine skill, is a very, very new age skill which one has to build, or which one has started building after the digital age has become more matured. And when I say a human plus machine skill, what do I mean by it? And I'll come to that when we go to the next chart. By the way, just a test check in between, am I audible? I'm assuming I am, given the silence. So anyway, so the last part, and this is where I'm going to spend a lot of my time talking to you about what do you mean, and this is the crux of my entire presentation, right? What do you mean, by this particular thing of skills to succeed? So the first thing, and you will see this, what is called S2S means skills to succeed. And if you notice, I have added an adjective called the relevance matrix. The relevance is extremely important word here. Why? Because you might have the skills, but are they relevant in a given context? Is what is very, very important. I think, I don't know how many of you have read, kind of what we call Karl Marx, a very interesting human being, extremely, powerful philosopher. And he used, kind of a word called dialectics and dialectical. And I think that is extraordinarily important in the field of digital also today. Because a lot of us, have mastered, and we go to so many classes and we go and, kind of watch ourselves and we do all these courses which are there. We are actually mastering on many occasions a number of skills, what I call the mechanical skills, the mechanical digital skills. Whereas what you have to differentiate yourself is what Marx would call the dialectical digital skills. The dialectical digital skills are extremely important because they are the skills that are relevant in a given context, right? It is a very simple thing. If I as a human being, so if I have to cook food for today for my family, and if I enter the kitchen and I may be very good at programming, it doesn't work, right? Because my family is not going to eat bits and bytes for dinner, right? They're not going to eat bits and bytes for lunch. I better be good at cooking if I have to feed my family well, right? And so, therefore, in that context, what is very, very important is contextual skills, right? I better be very good with skills in a certain context. And that's why the word relevance is very important in the context of the matrix. Let me explain this matrix to you in a little bit. So on the x-axis here, we are talking about the two types of era. So this is a 2x2, as you may call it. And on the left-hand side, you have the pre-digital era. And on the right-hand side, you have the digital era. And on the y-axis, you basically have, two buckets, in which I have kind of built the skills to succeed. One are the core set of core skills that you must master to succeed, and one are the peripheral skills that have remained on the periphery because the era has changed. So when I'm in this particular box number kind of 1 here, then in box number 1 I'm basically talking about the pre-digital era and the skills which are peripheral, whereas if I'm in box 2, I'm talking about pre-digital skills that are very core to my to my pre-digital era. Similarly, if I'm in box 3, I'm talking here about skills that are very peripheral in the digital era. And if I'm in box 4, then I'm really talking about skills that are extremely core to my success in the era. And notice these skills have been color-coded for no reason. The color coding is right mentioned here. So if any skill is in orange, they are a soft skill. If they are a business skill, they are in green. If they are a value building skill, they are in this particular whitish font, creamish whitish font, and then the color, and then the human plus machine skill is in yellow. And now let me go to this matrix in a little bit of detail, because this is very, very important for you all and for me too. Okay, because none of the skills that I'm talking of, and I'm talking about today on this particular box, which is the right-hand box, many of those skills, I don't know how many of them do I really have myself, because one needs to constantly upgrade, right? I may have a few of them. I may not have completely some of them. And I may have 50% in some of them, and I need to upgrade myself in a lot. So please don't feel, kind of left out, disheartened, or, kind of feeling a little bit low when you read these skills on the right-hand side and say, oh, I don't have a lot of this. It's nothing to do with your IQ. It's nothing to do with anything that you're, endowed with. It's a lot to do with where you get this from and how you can master it. So don't even think about, or don't get, dissuaded or disenchanted or, demotivated when you're watching this particular slide. Okay, so let's talk about something interesting. Okay, let's start talking about soft skills, right? So when you look at communication and compassion, and I'll come to compassion in 2 minutes, but communication is actually a core skill which is going to be pre-digital as well as in digital, right? It's going to be an important skill for as a soft skill, because without communicating, without talking about your work, without talking about how you can influence, you will never be able to influence, right? So having a good communication skill was important prior to digital and is now going to be important as a core skill during the digital. What is very important is compassion. And this is very, very important, guys. I mean, please don't underestimate the value of compassion right now. Because in a digital era, especially, when a lot of us are, kind of fixated, right? We are fixated. I'm using this word very responsibly. We are fixated with looking at our screens. We are fixated at, kind of really talking about ourselves. We are sharing enormous number of selfies with a lot of those patterns that come handy across various platforms that we want to share on. A lot of us tend or start thinking only about ourselves. Oh, how good do I look? Oh, is that background better for my selfie? Oh, or is this really good for me? Am I looking great in this? What is very important now in this era of digital, when a lot of this technology and a lot of this what we call assets are available to you, think about the society, right? Think about compassionately about people around you. Think about how you can make the best use of all the digital assets that are available to you to make the best of things. And that's the reason why I loved the example of the air conditioning factory, because they could have even built the entire factory using all the technologies in there, right? Without the solar paneling above their roof. They could have taken the power from the grid. Why should they have invested? But they invested in the grid. They acted with more compassion and responsibility, and that's what made them different in the use of digital technologies. And I think that is extraordinarily important. Compassion is a very, very important thing as digital goes from one place to another, or as digital technologies mature, because it's not the power of the technology that counts, it's how you use the technology matters a lot more to society. And, if that is what compassion is all about, compassion is about how well do you apply or deploy the technology for the well being of society. I think that is super powerful. So, compassion, communication is what we have covered. Look at this very interesting skill called memorization. And this was very important, according to me, in the pre digital era, where you had to memorize a lot many things, processes. You had to memorize a lot many things on the shop floor. You had to memorize a lot many chapters as a student, etc. But now that has become a completely, peripheral skill in the digital era, because a lot of it is available to you in the form of very simple things. You can keep, kind of a code, chart or a code sheet right next to you when you start programming. You can actually start looking at multiple screens and, kind of start delivering on your work. You really don't need to memorize anything as such, except a few things, I would say, which are very fundamental, like tables, etc., which is important in our day-to-day life. But barring that, you really don't need to memorize anything in order to deal with a business situation very effectively, which was actually there when it was in a pre-digital era. And I've seen this myself. So things which, memorization of certain parts of processes or of certain codification of processes, which can now be actually seen on a handheld screen, and the workforce or the manager on the shop floor can actually look at the screen and say, okay, this is the process. I think we missed this particular part in this journey. Let me go back, right? Earlier, it was not so. They act to physically stop things, go back, check whether what they've got is correct or not, and then, kind of start moving forward. So this is a very interesting skill, which was a core skill and now has suddenly become a peripheral one in the digital era. So we've talked about communication, compassion, memorization. Let's look at creativity. And if you notice, creativity was a peripheral skill, rather on the edges of core when it was pre-digital, but it is absolutely core when it's, kind of digital. And this is very important, right? A number of people who are doing fine arts, if you really look at an engine which influences your regular stuff. Say, for example, a food ratings platform. And when you really talk about a food ratings platform or a restaurant's rating platform, you know what? How many digital technologies actually go in that? You're using analytics at the back end. Why? Because you need to really crunch the data that comes to you on ratings, understand, how this is getting rated, make the most of the comments that people are making in the comment section, combine it with quantitative ratings, and then put the final rating together. So there's an analytics part of it there. But there is more of creativity, because you need to show the food which is being served by that restaurant in a very creative way. You just can't show something dirty and say, go to that restaurant, right? I mean, it's not done. So your creativity juices need to flow on how you organize that page, how you organize the ratings, which are given to you, what font you should be using. So your creativity is very important. Earlier, a lot of this was done on, paper brochures. So the creativity was minimal because you had very few choices around printing things like that. But now, given that the screen, the technology, and a host of other things allow you to, use it in its fullest aspect, you can really be creative. And therefore, creativity is a fantastic skill and becomes core to us. So as you notice, I've just discussed, and I'm not going to discuss all skills on, soft skills aspect, because these are not only the soft skills which are relevant. I would say these are the one of the maybe 4 out of the 10 or 15, but this grid would have become very crowded and you would not have understood anything. And that's why I'm limiting myself to discussing 4 or 5 of each of these skills, or maybe 3 at times. Now let us come to some of the business skills, right? So if you notice, problem solving, right, is a very interesting kind of a skill which was absolutely on the edges of core and peripheral in the pre-digital era. So of course you needed to solve a problem. I mean, I will not say that, in order to get, the right, kind of the machine doing the right kind of, or the production of a nut and bolt, you are not problem solving. Of course you have to solve a problem. And people in the mechanical engineering domain, in electrical engineering domain, those who have built grids, have solved enormous amount of problems in order to give us the power and the infrastructure and the manufacturing capability that we have today. But look at the way this skill has now changed. Because of the fact that you can now attach sensors to your machines, because of the fact that hardware has become so cheap, because of the fact that you have Wi-Fi that you can install in your units, because of the fact that this Wi-Fi has become very fast, and because that you have now 4G and 5G is just knocking our doors, the problem solving, as you can notice, has not just remained as problem solving, it has become data-driven problem solving. Why? Because now there is tons of data that gets generated, and you have the algorithms, the machine learning tools that are available either on the cloud, where you can actually purchase them as and when you require, or they are available to you in terms of programs which you can actually buy and keep ready and use the data on it and then acquire your insight whenever you want. So that, because of the availability of all that, the problem solving has largely gone from mere problem solving to data-driven problem solving. And that is very important, because with data-driven problem solving, where you need skills like, data-driven skills like analytics, statistics, understanding of data, but also, mind you, creative skills of building visualizations from the data. And this is very important. So if I've got the best of insight, from the data I'm a statistician by profession, as you may have noticed. And imagine that, I have unearthed the best insight in the whole company basis the data I've analyzed. But imagine that I put it in the form of a very dirty chart, which, people read and say, I don't understand anything. What is the use of all that data, right? So creativity now needs to combine with data-driven problem solving in order to give me the best result for that particular data-driven problem solved, right? So therefore, now you're using combination of skills in a far better way because of the assets, the digital assets that get provided to you. So that is one thing. Now you come to the next business skill, which is what we call output-driven collaboration. As I spoke about this just 15 minutes ago, maybe, or 10 minutes ago, maybe, we were really talking about, there was collaboration. It's not that, your parents were not collaborating with someone, or my parents were not collaborating. They were collaborating on the shop floor. They were collaborating in offices. They were coming together and trying to solve a problem. become more creative, etc. But remember, they were doing it largely to increase the output, to go or to drive what we in economics call economies of scale, to become more cheaper on the shop floor. And that was the driving force of that collaboration. And therefore, it was more of output-driven collaboration that we were talking about. But now in the digital era, this output-driven collaboration, which was a core skill, has changed to what we call the outcome-driven collaboration, right? So you're not here talking about, as I said, the number of cars, right? You're talking here about the quality of experience in the car, right? So when you really talk here about the greatest example that comes to your mind is a Tesla. Or, when you now sit in a car, you are always comparing things to a Tesla or to something that you have experienced on your cell phone. So say, for example, it's a very classic case. I was with one of my clients, and I was standing in an expo. It was what we call a large exhibition, and it was full of kind of car companies, various industries, mobile companies, all sorts of companies. And what was very interesting for me was that my client actually took me to one of the mobile companies, kind of not a store, but the booth, and said, Raghav, I really want this particular experience that the mobile is giving in my car. Wow. Now, that is something which is unique, right? 15 years ago, you wouldn't have said that. Because 15 years ago, you would have just gone to one car company and said, they are manufacturing 100 cars in one shift. Why isn't my company manufacturing 100 cars in one shift and only 60? That was all about the value of the collaboration that you wanted in the pre-digital era. But now you're talking about collaboration, which is outcome. They want an outcome, which is an experience, to say, if the mobile can do this, why isn't my car able to do this? And that is how you will see very high-end cars, or for that matter, even some of the middle, kind of category cars now coming in with a range of experiences that you may, have only believed would have been possible few years ago only in very high-end cars, right? Security features, wiper features, start features, the modes of driving, the Wi-Fi connectivity, the whole aspect of GPS. Some of these things which we always thought even 5 years ago would have been so expensive now come packaged in your car at price points which are very affordable. And I think that is actually making it very interesting, right? Because once you have creativity, once you have data-driven problem solving, once you are compassionate and you have the communication, then you are automatically ready to drive that experience based on your collaboration. And that is what is a very, very interesting thing. So we saw, kind of output-driven collaboration. And now we come to this whole aspect, which was a peripheral skill called handling complexity, which has now become a really core skill in the era of digital. And why is this a very core skill in the era of digital? Because in the era of digital, if you imagine a company or a shop floor, and you would have seen that in the case of the air conditioning company whose video I shared, it is a very complex situation. There is data coming in from the sensors. There is if you notice the injection molding equipment, there were only two people who are managing the entire process of injection molding and manufacturing something beyond that up to a certain extent, right? If it was an old factory, you would have seen maybe 10 people there. And who is doing a lot of that injection molding in an automated manner? Basically, the computers. Somebody is, the data is coming, somebody, the processor is processing that data, it is giving an instruction, the machine is taking that instruction, releasing, the metal at that temperature, bending it, making it in a certain way, and that's how, the problem is getting, kind of the complexity is getting handled. But remember, when you're now supposed to handle not only humans and separately, but humans and machines together, the extent of complexity dramatically changes. And that's how handling complexity becomes a very core skill, because here, if the machines are no more separate from humans, the machines are together with humans. And that's why handling complexity becomes so important, right? As a business skill, right? So that is the business skill. And the last one, which I'm really talking about, is intrapreneurship. What do you mean by intrapreneurship? So there are two words where you might have heard about entrepreneurship, which is your ability to build a business from scratch. And there is intrapreneurship, wherein you're basically an employee in a company where you're working, but the company allows you the space to actually build a new venture within the company, gives you the resources, gives you the ability to experiment, and then you can build a venture. And either you go out of the company and go with the venture, or the company buys the venture by itself. But this intrapreneurship was a very, very unheard skill in the pre-digital era. I mean, it was especially in the 70s or the 80s, when you had the license permit Raj, etc. You were just not allowed to be an entrepreneur because you were basically challenging the license given to you. In the 90s and in the 2000s, some entrepreneurship was being allowed because you started getting computers and it was more about efficiency. But now that you are talking about creativity, data, what we call outcomes, etc., entrepreneurship is now going from the zone of efficiency to the zone of experiences, right? So I can be very skilled as an entrepreneur in my own company to build a completely new asset for my company, build using a certain software, and I can then get a patent on it. I can live with that patent, make money out of that patent, but still I can sell this particular thing to my company. The company will also make money, but it will give me a share of the profits, right? So entrepreneurship is something which is now becoming possible. And why is this becoming possible? Is because, please understand this, this is very important. As a core skill, this is becoming very important. Why? Because the hardware is cheap, sensors are very cheap, right? Because the software, you can actually pick it up from a shelf somewhere lying in the cloud and get it for yourself and build something. So your hardware is cheap, your software is accessible. You can even get guidance on platforms, right? So if you go to a platform where you can solve your difficulties with other, startups, etc., who can help you solve that at a very, very effectively, very speedily, and at zero cost, right? So people are willing to give you guidance free of cost, which is very important. And there are investors who are willing to build, or who are willing to invest in your venture at, at very low rates of interest, or with very little strings attached. And so therefore, intrapreneurship is becoming very, very important today. So these are what I call the business skills that are becoming, from peripheral to core, and some of them are changing the way they were in a certain era as core, and have become core in a different way, such as output driven to outcome driven, and such as, what we call, problem solving to data driven problem solving. So that's about the business skill. The third variety of skills that we will discuss here is value building. As I said, value is supreme. I mean, if I know software, if I know hardware, I have the digital skills, but if I don't build value with it, I'm zero. I mean, nobody is going to really look at me today in the market, because the point is, you may be very, you may be very knowledgeable, you may have different skills, but if you don't build value with it, and that's why value building skills is very important. And that's where, things such as, let's look at critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is something which is important, or which was important in a pre-digital era, and is going to be continue to remain important in the digital era, because that is at the heart of anything you innovate. And I'm not saying that innovation never happened in the pre-digital era. I mean, that's stupid to say that, right? Because if pre-digital era no innovation happened, then how come we built so many roads and infrastructure and grids, and how did we build dams and all that kind of stuff? So critical thinking to solve a problem, to drive outputs, to become more creative was there, and will continue to exist, and will continue to be a core skill in the digital era too. Let's look at something what is known as in-house experimentation. And this is very important, because experimentation is basically a core skill which implies that you are inquisitive, you put A and B together and either find that is it A plus B, or is it A into B, is it A divided by B, or it is nothing. I mean, you really try and mix and match and try and do things. It's basically a skill which displays the inquisitiveness of your mind to experiment with things around you, right? But a lot of those skills were actually done in-house, right, in the pre-digital era. Why? Because companies were closed entities. They were nothing like ecosystems as you see today. Because in the pre-digital era, companies, were never able to. They were only collaborating with, say, university laboratories, and that too, it was a long distance collaboration. So people used to get out of the company, go to the laboratory in the university, spend a day there, come back, miles of travel, etc. All that, and it used to be very laborious and kind of could be frustrating at times, etc. But now today, because of the digital technologies that are available, you can actually drive experimentation with ecosystems. And what do you mean by an ecosystem? In the context of where we are, right, as professionals or as individuals, ecosystem is essentially anything which is around you, right? So if you must have heard the word ecology, right? So ecology is broadly everything around you, and an ecosystem is basically the finite part that is relevant to your experimentation within the ecology that becomes relevant to you. So that's why you see the word system there, right? So the ecosystem is essentially a system that is coming out from various things around you, which you decide to make a part of that experimentation. So it could be startups, it could be your own friends, it could be your customers, it could be your suppliers. And remember now that because of digital technologies, a lot of this ecosystem driven experimentation is becoming a core skill. And why? Because now you can actually drive that experiment live. Imagine if something like a COVID would have attacked us 15 years ago, and if this was not around, right? Today, Zoom, or for that matter, Teams, or anything, if it was not around, we wouldn't have been talking here, right? And this is therefore a fantastic tool of ecosystem driven experimentation and collaboration. We are experimenting today how to communicate with each other, how well to do this, and therefore drive value for one another. And this ecosystem that we are talking today, therefore, consists of, Zoom, it consists of Adarsh College, Forum for Free Enterprise, myself sitting here, yourself sitting there, and tons of people, numbers of people who are actually listening to us on YouTube, and therefore even YouTube too. So therefore, ecosystem driven experimentation is extraordinarily important and is a core skill. Why? Because if you don't actually work with your ecosystem, understand that you really risk losing on being outcome driven. Because in the output era, right? So if you remember, there were a few types of cars in the pre-digital era, and there were kind of largely large. It used to always be, at least in my young age, people used to say iska bada gadi hai, iska chota gadi hai. That is how you used to categorize cars. Iska bada gadi hai, iska chota gadi hai, or iske paas gadi nahi hai. That's it, right? But now you don't categorize cars that way. You don't say iska chota gadi hai, bada gadi hai. You generally tend to say, what, the experience when I sit in that car is superb. I mean, the surround sound was great. You say that, I basically was able to get a seamless GPS, navigation done when I was traveling in the Ghats. I was able to, get the Bluetooth connectivity very well on my cell phone. Didn't really, bother me even when I was going at speeds, etc. So what are you talking here about? Outcomes. And so therefore, what is very important is that in that value building skill, if you are now going to drive that outcome, that ecosystem is going to be important for you. Why? Because you will not have the solutions for every aspect of that outcome, right? So imagine yourself that you are basically building a tool to give the driver of a car, the best driving experience he has or she has ever had in terms of his seat, in terms of a backrest. Now, if you want to do that, and if you want to install a massager there, if you want to install a neck guiding, a neck guiding guide to tell the driver, oh, you're drifting on your neck, or you're not drifting on your neck, etc. Not everything is going to be present in your skill set, right? You won't be able to design everything by yourself. You require an ecosystem to experiment with the technologies that you have, and that's why that's the critical skill. The second most important thing is design thinking, and this is very important. And you will see that I've actually mentioned design thinking as a core skill here, but this is outside here because this skill was not even talked about in the pre-digital era, and that's why it is outside the box. I mean, it's not out of the box, it's outside the box. Out of the box is thinking. This is outside the box because it does not even have a place It did not even exist in the vocabulary of the pre-digital era. It's basically come in very systematically and become very important in the digital era. Why? Because you now have the tools to design kind of your thinking, or to design with your thinking and the ecosystems to build the experiences your customers want along with your customers. So that's why the design thinking is a core tool. Sorry, design thinking is a core tool here. And then, coming to what we call, so I've tackled this ecosystem, critical thinking, in-house design thinking. So this is all about the value building skills. And lastly, I come to the most important skill, which is actually born out of the digital era, which is the human plus machine skill, right? And those are in yellow here. And that's why you will see some of the human machine skills, right, just are not there in the pre-digital era. They're outside the box. Why? Because they were just not there. You had robos in the pre-digital era. I'm not saying that, especially if you would have gone in an atomic energy plant, or if you would have gone even in certain manufacturing plants, you would have seen robos, automating production in a limited way. But cobotized value generation is a very different thing. And what do I mean by that? Cobotized value, so cobotics is a field where you are working side by side of a robot. So if you go in large manufacturing plants today, even for that matter, in the air conditioning unit, the video I shared with, you would have basically seen that there was a robotic arm and a person was next to it, right? So that is cobotics. You are working side by side of a robot. But now the point is, if you start miscalculating the speed at which the robot works, and you start feeding something on the assembly line before the robot starts doing things, you are not going to create value, because that's not going to really give any production. Something will get stopped in some time, right? So now, therefore, working with the cobot, right, collaboratively working with a robot to generate value is going to be very important. Also, what is important is, remember that it's not only about you working with the machine, but now there are going to be one machine working with another machine. So one robo working with another robo. So imagine that one robo is actually putting the shell of a car door, and the other robo is plugging in a handle in it, which is a smart handle. Now, if the two robots have to talk to each other, right, in that kind of a situation, then it is again cobotic, and then it is all automated, and therefore you have to now deal with two machines having their sort of, you have created them to work. They have their sort of their own mind. They need to coordinate amongst each other, and you are just managing the coordination based on a joystick, right? And that is what I call cobotized value generation, something that was not even existing, in the pre-digital era. Similarly, intelligent machining. Now you will have machines that will be far more intelligent. They will start taking their own decisions. Why? Because of the data-driven problem solving that you have done. Because of the fact that you have now designed, you have designed the machine with the help of the company to feed all the data, to allow it to make the decisions, and then to, kind of decide whether or not to stop or whether to function. So say, for example, if there is a major kind of a problem on the assembly line, and then imagine that the machine was not intelligent, and so therefore it just kept on feeding the assembly line. So many inputs that will be fed by the machine will just go waste, because they were just not required, right? Because something ahead on the machine line, assembly line, was not working. Imagine that, kind of the fact that the machine today, imagine that you are in a dam, right? And you are in a tidal power, kind of a unit, where you basically have, the rotor, which is not intelligent. But as soon as it becomes intelligent, and if there is some kind of a problem that it sends, instead of, completely shutting down the hydro machine, or, exploding, it will immediately give a signal, and it will immediately start taking steps on its own to ensure that the entire unit does not burst, or it does not crack, but only the machine, starts repairing itself. That is intelligent machining. And to do that, you have to have the skill to make the machine intelligent, to build machines in that way, to imagine those machines, to be more creative in drawing those machines, to ensure that the sensor is fitting in the right direction, in the right way, etc. And that's a very, very interesting combination of skills. which come around with data-driven problem solving, creativity, complexity, design thinking, etc. And the last part is about reimagining, right? And honestly, reimagining, it was there, right? I mean, again, if we wouldn't have had reimagining, we would have built the same tar roads that we would have had. But after that, we had concrete roads, right? After that, now we have plastic roads and all that kind of stuff. So even in the pre-digital era, there was some level of reimagining that was going on. But continuous reimagining is something very dramatically different, because continuous reimagining requires you to also have the support to reimagining. So a very simple thing, right? You would have been always drawing with a pencil and a paper. Imagine that you are drawing a machine or a picture of a machine, and there are certain specifications given to you. And now you have actually drawn the machine as per the specifications, but then suddenly something strikes you and said, you know what, I can make it better. In the pre-digital era, you would have gone back to the sketchboard once again, done all that. All this stuff would have taken a lot of time, and you would have wasted a lot of paper, right? Today, you don't need to do that. You have a pencil, which is a digital pencil, and you can store that file as version 1, and you can exactly use the version 1, define the new things that you've thought about in the version 1, compare and contrast whether the version 1 and version 2 match, whether they work. You can even check that with what is called as a digital twin, and then finally take a call on whether the additions that you wanted to make to the machine are good or not. And that is something which is what we call continuous reimagining, which is a skill now which you need to build to make the best use of digital technologies around you. So I think, as this is what I had to share, guys, with you. I mean, the point here is we all started very clearly with this whole point about what a digital era is. We defined it. We then understood what do you mean by success in that digital era, right? Then we moved on to understanding the definition of skills. Then we categorized those skills, which are very important to succeed in the digital era, into 4 categories. And then finally, we discussed examples of each of those baskets of skills, like soft skills, business skills, value building skills, human plus machine skills, and understood how relevant they are in the context of the digital era. I'll just stop here. Thank you very much again for the opportunity given to me to share my views. I hope it was interesting. Thanks a ton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raghav. I think you are not just MD as a leader, but you are a wonderful teacher as well. Every subject, every concept was crystal clear. And I like
because of my parents, by the way. My parents are teachers.
So yes, that's what. So you have that legacy and you are continuing with that. And of course, Mrs. Raghav is also a wonderful teacher, as I know.
Yeah, my wife is exactly. I'm married to a professor. Yeah.
I liked your S2S matrix, and no one can just forget the skills required in digital era, especially the creativity. We started with memorization, true, it is very much required. But then along with memorization, what you need is to look at everything very differently. So creativity becomes the key to innovation, and innovation will definitely lead to some excellence, some quality framework, and will help you to discover something new. Entrepreneurship has been talked a lot, and I think students need to take up more projects on entrepreneurship, so that what we are having as Make in India, I think surely they would be in a position to take care of. So I think the value building, soft skills, business skills, and human plus machine skills, all these 4 categorized explanation, and that to S2S matrix, I simply loved it. I thought everything has been put up in one matrix so nicely, and my students have immensely benefited, Mr. Raghav, from your lecture. Extremely sorry for the beginning, little bit delay and technical issues, but it was a great learning on the part of every one of you. Now, over to Mr. Sachin Dedia for question answer session. Mr. Sachin, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. So your guidance on skills to succeed in digital era definitely will help all the students actually, and it will help to change their life also. It was really energetic session we had, isn't it, all of you? Sir, can we start with the question answer session?
Yes, please. Thank you.
One or two questions. Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, what type of different initiatives can MNCs or Indian companies can take to develop different skills in today's youth?
Right. So I think there are various initiatives. So Accenture with Quest Alliance has already started disseminating digital skills. There is what is known as future skills. You can actually visit Accenture plus digital plus skills. And there are wonderful courses that have been designed which you can actually do free of cost. Retail skills, marketing skills. These are, you can do it, across the week. I mean, they're like 1 or 2 hours, sessions every day. And I think there is, you can really do those wonderful courses according to me and understand, where is your strength in that skill. So I think there is lots which is happening. To be very honest, NASSCOM, which is the Association of Software and IT and ITES companies, it's collaborating with a lot of Indian companies, with a lot of MNCs to build digital skills at scale within youth. And let me tell you one thing. I mean, I think as a college also, right, as Adarsh College, I mean, you can actually collaborate with National Skills Development Corporation and ensure also that, what are some of those packages that they have, which they would like to, disseminate free of cost to students. And I think that is, again, something which, colleges, MNCs, companies in India can really do. But do visit, some of the skills programs that Accenture runs. Many of them, as I said, are free of cost. You can, start learning them, future skills. That's what they're known as. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. One more question from our participant is, today's companies are having their own protocols for working over there. So how a particular person can nurture and use their skills over there?
So I think every company, so I'll tell you one thing. I mean, gone are the days where, companies were fixated with, how you dress and, what you wear and, how you put your tie or, how you come. I mean, honestly, if you go to even some of the most prestigious forums, people just come in, t-shirts. I'm wearing a t-shirt today. I mean, I wouldn't imagine, going like this on a presentation, right? 5 years ago, to be very honest. But I'm like very comfortable in my t-shirt, sitting in my bedroom, talking to people, wishing well. And I think it's interesting. Why? Because I think the protocol, the mindset of people has dramatically changed. People want value. Remember one thing: if you are in a position to deliver value, the world runs after you, right? Wherever you come from. And I can understand that there are issues. Some people remain, kind of away from the limelight and, they don't get. But as you showed the inspirational video of Mr. Bola, right? I mean, that was the whole point, right? Nothing stopped that individual. If it was the local board that didn't give him the admission or it didn't allow, he fought. If the local IITs never wanted him, he went to MIT, right? I mean, I was stunned, and I'm so happy you showed that video. Why? Because it kind of inspires you that you are everything, but you're not doing anything. And it's therefore, build value. I mean, I will always constantly see that is that don't fall, tell companies it's not about your protocol, right? It's about I'm value. I can build this value for you. This is my USP. This is how I'm going to do it for you. And this is what it means to your business. I think that's the case you have to make.
Thank you, sir. Last question. What are the failures for Tata Nano cars actually?
That I would not, I mean, it's a interesting question. There's nothing technologically, I think it was really ahead of its time, right? And essentially, when you really look at the nano car, I mean, some cars are conceptually, products are conceptually ahead of their time. And to embrace them, right? It's like this. Let me give you an example. Can you imagine that actually there was a mobile cell phone or cell phone done by Amazon, which was really high end, but finally they had to sell it at $1, because it was far ahead of its time. Similarly, I feel that the car, the Nano, is a great product, highly innovative from a technological standpoint. very good on the road, stable, etc., but it was far ahead of its time. Some products, I mean, if you would introduce it now in a different variant, and if you, don't call it a poor man's car, you just kind of call it just a car. I think that would be a far better way to kind of sell it, and people would accept it. I think that is very powerful. That is very powerful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your valuable guidance and
Sachin, I just want to ask one more question because there are a number of participants who had put it in the chat box. I think, Raghav, they just want to know more on cobotized value generation and Industry 4.0. That question got repeated 3-4 times. So I thought I should just, in order to make them clear. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a sweet spot. I'm the global research lead for Industry 4.0 for Accenture, in terms of doing what we call writing research or research-based papers. So can share? That's a good thing I can talk about with some level of understanding. When you really talk, right? So when you really look at what we call Industry 3.0 or the prior eras, 2.0, 1.0, etc. I mean, 3.0 was all about machines being there, but the machines were never able to talk to a machine. They were never able to even talk to a human, right? I mean, as simple as that. You were working with a machine, or you're working on a machine. I would say on a machine. But Industry 4.0 is a time when the machine is working with the machine and the machine is working with you. It's a time when you can use the data that you're collecting from the machine to make it work better. You can use the data to decipher when this machine will actually break and start maintaining it beforehand. When will it rust? When will it stop working and start maintaining it beforehand? So, in a motor, if you earlier, if you used to run a motor in a testing kind of a situation, you used to run a motor, it used to burn because you never, you could not understand, what RPM, right, this motor was working at. And, earlier, you never had guidance around that. But today, there is a sensor, it will tell you, oh, look at this motor right now, it's going to burn. So you can actually see what is the tenacity to that nth level, right? Earlier, you were, kind of grappling, that kind of a thing. So now it's a situation where you have the combination of digital technologies, and this is the most important thing, that you can use the combination of digital technologies like 3D printing, digital, analytics, big data, artificial intelligence, to build a corporation, to build a shop floor that will give you an output which will drive enormously better experience. I mean, look at this. Let me give you examples, right? So today there are large car companies in the world wherein you can actually make a call, right? You can actually make a call. You are calling to a person to tell him the seat color you want, the stitch you want, the seat rest, the neck rest, the way that you want it to be adjusted, and the color of the wooden panel, etc. you want, and this is directly being fed on the production line. This could not have been possible, in the pre-digital era or Industry 3.0. It's possible now in the Industry 4.0. That all this is being fed in the production line, this is being assimilated, and then when the car is getting manufactured, all this is now being done. So this is what is called Industry 4.0. When you are in a position to use combinations of digital technologies to be very efficient and to drive game-changing experiences, you are in an Industry 4.0 world. Now, ahead, what is going to happen is, imagine that when you will have 5G, guys, you will basically have a situation where a plant in Malaysia will start connecting with a plant in India. And the plant in Malaysia will tell a plant in India, you know what, you are actually manufacturing something which has a lot of demand in Singapore. So therefore, channelize all your production in that rather than focusing on a product which has no demand, which you're doing right now. This is game changing, right? I mean, imagine the resources that you will save. Imagine the kind of, and don't worry about employment issues, guys. I mean, the issue here is it will release a lot of monotonous labor. If you are just doing things, putting raw material on the machine, you can actually build up your skill to run the machine rather than just putting raw materials on it. So you are in fact chances of going higher up the income ladder. And so that is why, that is the reason why this robotic skill is very important. Earlier, if you're just thinking about only a machine and you are just putting, things on a machine and waiting for, the Charlie Chaplin movie, right? He used to put things on a machine and, used to wait, right? So the whole human chain, Modern Times was I think the name of the movie, where, Charlie Chaplin used to put, and then he used to show even people going on the machine. And he sits on the machine and, kind of comes out from the other side. It's a very fantastic, way to really show what human beings were becoming. But now digital allows you to go fabulously above. It can raise your level of, understanding of the machine, of making it more productive, and really create value with the machine, with the robo, which is next to you. To build value, you're sitting next to the robo and you're building value with the robo. And imagine to be in that situation. It is amazing. Imagine yourself in a kitchen. You have a robo which is helping you, to stir the, the curry. In the meanwhile, you would have cut the onions, right? Now that is fantastic, right? Because, and that is possible, by the way, guys. It is possible. You can do it at home. Lego gives you sets like that. So all this was never possible when I was a kid, to be very honest. Or maybe Sachin sir, when you were a kid, right? I mean, this was not possible at all. But now it's possible. And I think that's what makes the difference.
Yes. Thank you, sir. As it was shown in the video of Lloyd companies also, that is Lloyd AC, all the Industry 4.0 machines are working automatically. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your valuable guidance and kind of support you gave to enlighten our all participants. Thank you for your precious time. This session will definitely change our minds and give us a way to be skilled, to be competent in our life. I thank all the participants for giving their time, all teaching and non-teaching staff. I'd also thank Saili Daptardar ma'am and Kiran Bhalerao for technical assistance. Special thanks to our principal madam, Dr. Vaidehi Daptardar, and Mrs. Swati Kapadia, CEO of Forum, for organizing this webinar.